Most of us became involved in the association because we had a special child. Andrea was born in 1950, and nothing was ever the same for us again. I don't think anything isolates you more than having a child who is different. We couldn't find reasons, we certainly couldn't find answers. And we got on that merry-go-round that parents know so well, of pediatricians, psychologists, psychiatrists, medicine man. Doctors really twice my age called me mother. And today it's sort of funny because doctors half my age call me Blanche.
When we were told by Dr. Cassidy in Schenectady that Scott would never be so-called normal, I said to Dr. Cassidy, you cannot take my child away from me. And he said, there is no reason for him to be taken away. If Walton can have such beautiful buildings, they can educate him. And so my husband let me cry from Schenectady to Walton. When we walked in our kitchen, my husband turned to me and he said, you have had your cry. Crying is not the answer. You are going to have to fight, and you start right now.
You have a family, you're on a track. And you make plans, and you budget, and you set near and long-term goals. But when you have a developmentally disabled family member, you cannot really make plans, and you certainly cannot set near and long-term goals. All of a sudden, the rails have been switched, and you're on a divergent track. And then you realize, as we did, that there are others out there in your circumstances. And so that begins the search, which we did. And NYSARC, for us, was a source of education, a source of encouragement and comfort and fraternization.
The funding mechanism would be 1/3 state, 1/3 feds, 1/3 agency. In Freeport, and I went to the state for the money, they didn't have it. They had made grants around the state so that they didn't have the 2/3. What they actually had, I think, was about half, 50%. And it was up to us to see what we could do about running it for the other half, which we didn't have either. But we did open. We did get it built. The only time we had difficulties when we went into the housing business. We started buying houses on their block. They didn't want us on their block. The argument first was that it would affect the value of their property, and then of course it came out that it didn't, because people bought the houses right next door.
There is a statewide community of interest that underlies NYSARC. From Montauk Point to Niagara Falls, we're one organization, and we look out for each other.
We are the largest family-influenced organization, and we have managed to be a force in Albany, and we are a force in the United States. I think that we have managed to shape the work that is being done on behalf of people.
Being part of a state organization is a great benefit to each local chapter, because each local chapter on its own couldn't have the impact at the state legislative level, nor with big financial institutions. So we can group together, and the state ARC guides us through this process, and we share all the benefits among one another. My daughter, who has special needs, is able to have a life, and it's all done with dignity, and I can go to bed at night and feel that she's safe.
the three people that had a good deal of influence and that I would love to be sitting having lunch with was Joseph T. Weingold, Helen Kaplan, who was the executive director of our Nassau chapter, and Tom Coughlin, who was the executive director of our Jefferson chapter and was the first commissioner of the then Office of Mental Retardation and Developmental Disabilities. I think these three individuals, all family members, all professionals, all advocates, were cut from the same cloth. Their advocacy, their commitment was unselfish. They didn't need to be told what the mission of this organization is. They were the mission. And I learned and will always be grateful that I had an opportunity to know the three and would have done anything to have sat down and have lunch with the three of them.
I became interested in disability issues when my oldest daughter was born. She was born with developmental disabilities, and as soon as she was born, the doctor said, "Don't bother coming back to the hospital. Leave her here. You don't have to see her again." And that was the farthest thing from my mind at the time. I became president of the state association because it was like a backdoor entrance. The existing president, Irene Platt, was offered a job with the state of New York as a commissioner, a deputy commissioner for quality of care. And I remember a phone call from Mark saying that he and Irene Platt wanted to meet with me, and they were flying to Buffalo to meet with me. We met, and she told me that at the time that I was the only person, the only vice president at the time who she would trust to relinquish her presidency to, and if I didn't do it, she wasn't going to take the job. So I took it.
I have a family member, my son, who's 56 at this time, was born with Down syndrome. So as our son, we became extremely interested in him. I mean, he's the only child that we have, so he really became the focus of our life.
I got involved in the organization initially with the birth of our daughter in 1963. I started on our local chapter level giving free dental checkups to the people we serve, and I went on from there to become a board member, and from there to become a state board member, and from there on becoming president of the ARC New York. So it's been a journey.
As an attorney, I became involved in various not-for-profit organizations in the community. I'm a parent of a daughter, Hillary, and my wife and I ultimately, through the process of obtaining services for her, were led to Ontario ARC.
I became involved because a man whom I knew well, who worked at the ARC Westchester, called me one day many years ago and said that the ARC Westchester needed a lawyer on its board, and would I do it? So I finally agreed. I still had young children, but I agreed and told him that I would come on the board, but only if I was given a job to do. So I have been on the board ever since.
I became involved with the New York City chapter, my husband Hal and I, and my family, when our daughter Julia was born in 1982. And several years later, I received a flyer from her preschool about AHRC New York City, and a sibling program they had for our daughters. And that was the first connection to, at the time, NYSARC. And we quickly realized how connected families were to this organization. We felt it immediately. When I look at being connected to AHRC, it was in 1993 that I joined the New York City board. And that was just a wonderful opportunity to really meet those families that started the organization.
My daughter Lauren Bernstein was born with significant disabilities. The reason I became interested in disability issues was clearly because of Lauren. I had no connection to anyone with a disability prior to that. I just had no contact with that community. And so it was important for me to learn about the community. And frankly, when I found AHRC Nassau, they saved her life.
I've always had a natural attraction or affinity towards the helping professions. I originally started as pre-med. I wanted to be a doctor, changed over to psychology, and I figured, this would be the best way to help people. Now, I didn't always go into it with the idea that I was going to work in IDD. But then when I joined the Commission on Quality of Care and I started to become more familiar with IDD and acute and severe mental health issues, I just found there was something about it. I was drawn to it.
I got interested in this field, like many people, through my family connection. My brother Tim is 58 years old. Tim was born with Down syndrome, and when Tim was born, my family got connected through their church with some other members of the Schenectady ARC, and ARC really has been part of our life, part of my life, since that time.
My journey to becoming a CEO is a long one because obviously I've been in the field for over 30 years. I came from India back in 1989, and I pursued our master's in clinical psychology. After that, because I happened to be close to Tupper Lake, I was able to get a job as a psychologist for Sunmount Developmental Center, which is an institution for, at the time, OMRDD. So after I had received my green card, I had found the career that I wanted to be in. I became very attached to this field. So I started looking for other opportunities, and I found this opportunity at the ARC Lexington.
During my presidency, we moved the state office from New York City to Albany. I thought it was a good move because we got a lot more space. I think it was much more centralized as far as geographically located in the state. We were closer to a lot of the other chapters. We were able to meet with the governor.
I served as president of NYSARC between the years of 2000 and 2006. And some of the priorities we had at that time, I looked at four major goals myself. We wanted to increase membership. We wanted to develop a national presence, which we didn't have at that time. Though the National ARC was around, we wanted to. We wanted to tackle the structural issues of the organization and have an open and ongoing dialogue between the chapters and NYSARC.
Some of the successes we've had during COVID are really incredible. The Strategic Vision Initiative has been moving forward with some really fine programs for our future. I'm especially proud of the DEA initiative, which will be starting. The challenges we faced during the really horrible time, the past 3 years, have been mostly felt, I think, by the executive directors on local chapters and by state office staff. It's been an incredible time, and we met the challenge, and I think we met it, and we succeeded in so many ways.
As president, my project was NYSARC Gives Back. And at the time, the thinking was that We were characterized as an organization, as a field that always took, that always had our hands out. So this was our way of saying we do make a contribution to the community. The unique result of NYSARC Gives Back was that chapters mobilized across the state, and there were food banks, there were walks, there were fundraisers, and virtually every chapter participated. And the word, of course, got out to the state legislature, to the governor, to the news media, that this was a phenomenon.
My strategies were quite simple, and that's been my strategy all along, which is simply to talk up the realities to the people that I know. One of the most important, if not perhaps the most important success, if you can call it that I felt and saw during my tenure as president was the keeping of the organization together as one organization.
One of the important accomplishments that the board did while I was president was to take a very serious look at our governing structure. We were a board of approximately 148 individuals representing the 60 chapters at the time, meeting only twice a year, with the executive committee doing the yeoman's work in between on behalf of the board. And we wanted to look at making a board more engaged, meet more often. It took over a year, but we looked at our governing structure to be more nimble and responsive to the 21st century that we were in.
In 2011-2012, the ARC of the U.S. was able to establish a meeting at the White House for leaders in the developmental disability community nationwide. And Ben and Jack Schupenauer, the then president, and I went representing the ARC of the U.S. and New York State. And it was a very exciting experience. The highlight, of course, was meeting President Obama. That afternoon, President Obama came in and spoke to all of us about our issues and said, I'll never forget it, he said, I hope you'll have my back. I have your back. And then he came down and he was shaking hands of people in the front rows. When he got to me, I shook his hand and I put my other hand over it. And I said to him, I have a daughter and we need funding. And we need you to be reelected. And we need you to protect our funding because our folks need life. And he said he would.
Advocacy is my number one priority. When I applied for this position and when I accepted this position, it was very clear that the board wanted our advocacy efforts to be improved, enhanced, and so I really threw myself into advocacy 100%. We've made great strides in advocacy. We transformed our committee structure and merged a couple of committees together. It's a more energized effort. We have phone to action campaigns, one-click campaigns that are happening. We have newsletters that are going out now. So I think we've delivered on improvements, but obviously there are more opportunities to do better. And we're going to have to, because every year we have to fight for continued funding.
The EDA represents the leadership of the chapters, and I've said it before, the leadership of the chapters is an incredible body of talent and resources. And sometimes we've been successful as an organization in harnessing that, other times we haven't been. The field has evolved, and the environment that we're operating in has evolved and become, you think of the challenges we've had in the last 3 years with the worldwide pandemic and an unprecedented staffing crisis. And, we've had to come together and we've had to work together. So EDA for me has always been a way to harness the talent and the skills of the other executive directors, and to try to align that with the ARC New York and its leadership, and make sure we're all pulling in the same direction.
When we think the ARC is a family-based organization, ARC Lexington is a family-based organization, what does that mean to me? I will tell you from my experience at the ARC Lexington, it is truly a family because families guide it. No matter what decision we're making, there's a family member on the board, there's a family member on our committees that are truly keep making sure that we are always thinking about how that impacts that person we support, because that's what families think about.
The proudest time for me as president is of the many managers, direct care staff, clinicians, executive directors, fellow board members, and 100 of volunteers that made our organization successful. That's my proudest moment, is to be associated with all of those folks. We've done some things at the Board of Governors level, but it all goes back to the local chapter and the staff that we have. That's what makes us who we are, and I'm proud to be associated with them.
Increasing my listening skills was key to working as the president of the ARC New York, because the people who are in the trenches, so to speak, have a lot to say, have a lot to give, and are well worth listening to.
The advice I give to future presidents is to get out and meet the people in the chapters. When I was president, I went to almost every chapter. I tried to get to every chapter I could get to. Jeff and I took a road trip throughout New York when, the summer of my presidency, and stopped at as many chapters as we could. Because I think you'll be amazed at what's happening in different places.
I think some of the things I'm most proud of as having served as president of the ARC New York was preserving our archives, which will be valuable for many years to come. Downsizing our governing board so that it is more intimate and engaged and meets more. Our membership growth and the value of membership, and our branding, which is so important to coalesce our organization, which is the largest in the world, to look together, and particularly for our staff to understand that they're part of this great organization, even though locally they serve people in different parts of New York State.
I believe some of the successes were in our ability to bring chapters together. Particular success was the achievement of 100,000 members during my presidency, which had been a goal of ours for some time. And that was really a milestone for the organization.
The history of the ARC New York really is the history of the field, both in New York and nationally. We have been leaders, going back to the days of Willowbrook and deinstitutionalization and rights for school children, the IDEA, all the legislation that has been part of the agenda for this organization has really been part of the agenda for the national disability rights movement for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. There's a saying, I think, to know where you're going, you have to understand where you've been. We've been through a lot, and we need to understand that and appreciate it.
Being the president of this association was some of the proudest moments of my life. I was able to do things and meet people who I never would have been able to before. Memories and relationships that I made people that I met will stick with me for the rest of my life.
I think the ARC New York is viewed the way it should be, which is, I think, the largest and most influential provider of supports and services for people with IDD, probably in the world. I know we always talk about in New York State, but I'm not aware of any other larger provider anywhere else. And this organization has a rich history of leading the field. When you look back in terms of things, significant events that happened, like Willowbrook, our organization was a plaintiff in that case. And I think that's how we view ourselves, and I think that's how others view us too. We have an incredible amount of influence, I think, because of our size, our collective strength, and our passion. And we have just incredible passion at all levels.
If I think of the next decade, what would I like to see change? I think that's in two areas. One is clearly funding. And then speaking as a parent and a professional, I would love to see true community integration, community inclusion for people with disabilities. It would be my dream that a person, a young woman with disability, is able to even think about being recognized because of their achievement. So my dream is true integration, not because somebody is different, but because they're very capable.
We're all together. We're one family. I think our motto of being stronger together is a real good one. I find that the past year, especially working together with the state office, the executive directors, the volunteers, it showed us what a great organization we are. 75 years strong and still young.